Welcome back, everyone, to the VS Code Insiders podcast, your behind-the-scenes scoop on everything VS Code. I'm one of your hosts, James Montemagno, and with me again, Mr. Pierce Bogan. How's it going, Pierce?
Hello. Doing amazing, James.
What I love about this is like Pierce all of a sudden goes into like the serious mode. Like if you're watching this on YouTube, he's like all of a sudden like, what's going on? It's like a deer. We also have Daniel Imms from the engineering team who's going to give us a sneak peek behind the scenes on all the brand new terminal updates. You know, I'm a huge terminal fan if you follow me, but we want to give you the behind the scenes. It's kind of one of the point of this entire podcast because, you know, you can watch the YouTube, you can watch and read the release notes and all the awesome things that are going in to the product itself. But as everything is developing, you see things in the open, you get insider builds every single day. You don't need to subscribe to anything. Everyone can be an insider. And if you're listening to this, you can also just use mainline too. We talk about new features there. But the cool part that I've, been following for a long time, but actually had no idea how any of it worked is how the planning works. Like, I work at Microsoft. We do a lot of planning. We do a lot of stuff, but actually everything's just open as well. But I don't really know how it all works. So I wanted Piers to kind of break down the August plan, iteration plan, what's in it, how do people like get involved? Like what's the actual actions that are going on? Because to me, the cool part is like not only just when the new features are coming out and release, but following along, giving feedback as well.
That's right. Yeah. So like any good team, we have a giant Azure DevOps backlog with tons of epics. No, I'm just kidding. We don't do any of that. That's not how we work at all. So like you were saying, James, like the cool thing about this team that's very unique is like, it's not only that we work in the open. I think that's pretty common actually is like, our code and issues and PRs are in the open. That's pretty common for open source, but like our planning is also in the open, right? So every single month, basically, we do, right, as kind of we're getting ready to ship you the new stable release, we kind of go through this process of planning. And it's kind of bottom up. So the individual engineers working in their areas, they know the features best, they know the feedback for their areas best, and they can really represent what needs to happen the next iteration, which is basically what we call a sprint. On the team. And so like everyone kind of sources some items. At the same time, of course, there's like some goals that like from a leadership perspective, we're like, well, we kind of want to take the product in this direction. This is something we really need to take care of because of X, Y, or Z reason. And so there's kind of like this reasoning process where, people bring their bottoms up ask and there's some top down ask. And we kind of have a little bit of a process for working those things out. Look for any conflicts, things like that. And then the first Monday of our next iteration, we actually publish this plan on GitHub. So the entire plan and what every single person on this team is working on, you can actually go, if you go to the GitHub issue, if you go to the issues tab of the VS Code repo, there's a pinned issue called iteration plan. And you can actually look through that and you can see exactly all the different things that every single person on the team is going to be working on with linked issues, right? So you can see exactly, that follow along with the process. You go to the issue, you can see any PRs or anything like that. You can see the discussion about how we're going to implement it, the design. So all of that is actually happening in the open. And like you said, James, like if you're using insiders, you'll actually see like, okay, Daniel will deliver some feature. He'll check it off on that. He'll close the issue. And then you'll actually see that show up in insiders, right? And so that's like a really cool loop of not only our code being out in the open, but also our planning being out in the open. And so there's also some cool things like as you look through the plan that you'll notice, like we have emojis for everything. So if something has like a running person next to it, it means that's what the person on the team is actually working on. Obviously, if it's checked, it's done. So there's like cool little things like that in the issues that you can kind of go through and see. And so one thing we really want to do in this podcast, because this is the Insiders podcast, is be talking about what's on our plan for this month before you actually see it in the product. And of course, as week by week, as we're adding these things, have people like Daniel come on and talk about the improvements we're making inside the product.
Yeah, like when you go and you look at this, like the first thing you see from Kai here is kind of like the date. Like this is the August work. So it's work being done in August, delivered in the beginning of September. And it means Endgame. Like to someone coming in, what does that actually mean? Like I know there's an emoji, but I don't even know what Endgame means. I assume that, it's like done, but there's begins and done, but they're in September, but not in August. What does that mean? Like from someone looking at this thing.
Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about like what Endgame entails?
Sure. So our iterations are broken up into development weeks, which are typically 2 to 3 weeks. And then after that comes Endgame, which is a week that we focus on testing and stabilizing. And then the week after that is called Debt Week, where we try to focus on technical debt, and also continue to stabilize the release before it releases later in that week.
So everything that kind of, is there a point basically that's like, if the feature's not done, it just goes to the next iteration? Like, is it like, I mean, obviously this list has to be evolving throughout like the month, right?
Yeah. So they'll sometimes go over to the next month. Maybe they'll land in stable in like a partially implemented state. Maybe depending on the feature, it could be experimental, disabled by default, but you can turn it on. It's very, very fluid.
So,
and we actually have like our test plan items. We literally you can see our test plan for the release. So each engineer also writes their own tests, right? In terms of like the flow. We have some tooling internally that will automatically assign every single person, no matter your role in the team, PMs, designers, whoever it might be, to actually go and run through these issues. Depending on your OS, you may get different issues and that sort of thing. And then there's like this reconciliation process that kind of happens as part of that, of like, oh, I feel like pretty good about this. Like, we didn't really have anything come up during, the test plan. We can promote this to stable. And then, of course, there's like the conversation of like, okay, well, maybe this isn't stable, but we have this as a setting and it's off by default, or maybe it's on by default, or maybe we're going to start with it off by default, but there's some risk. So we actually want to do a controlled rollout throughout the month. So those are the types of kind of conversations that happen in addition to the testing going on that week.
Yeah, when you're in here, like you also scroll to the bottom. So everything's broken down into different categories as well. At the very bottom, it's interesting like how this all works. There's like deferred. So like Daniel, if you're like working on like a feature, like what determines like where it goes, how it goes, or if it does get deferred, like, and where in the process does that happen?
Well, deferred specifically is about things that we were planning to do, but we're no longer planning to do. So it's like accountability where we had it in the plan, but it's being removed. We're not doing that anymore. For what you might have thought it meant actually is that it carries over, but that's just the case for anything that's not complete typically.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Is there anything, Pierce, in this sort of release? I see there's like all the emojis, there's red things, there's blocked work,
all the emojis.
There's running. I go into the planning meetings on there's like, it feels like the team, I don't know, Daniel, like people, they seem to want to report like different emoji statuses, or like, I really wanted to be a red dot today, I really wanted to be a running person, like do these emojis kind of excite the team like in that stand-up on Monday?
The red dot specifically we call the clown nose, and it's a bit of a mark of shit. It's called out every week that, hey, you still haven't got an issue tracking this. But yeah, most issues would have nothing or a runner. If it has a runner and it's checked, it means we're going to be talking about it in our planning sync. If it's just checked, it means it's already been talked about the previous week. But then there's other ones like the hand that means it's blocked. There's the black box, which means it'll take a bunch of iterations. Yeah. There's more, but I can't think of them now.
Did these also include like community contributions? How are those part of like the planning iteration?
Very rarely do community contributions show up here. If say there's a big PR that comes in from the community, it may show up as in it's going to take someone on the team a significant amount of effort to look into it. But typically, community contributions are smaller. They come in through pull requests, and then they go to the feature owners who review them as part of their regular work.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So then, if it was something like really big and really juicy, then you're like, okay, like let's pull this in, basically. But it's less occurring.
Yeah. So the community contributions also get called out in our release notes at the bottom. And if it is a big juicy one, as you say, they would get a call out in a section above that as well, because like you want to tell people about the new features.
Yeah. If you haven't, just, I think we were doing this podcast, we kicked it off, and a lot of people are like, oh, like I love, just like seeing like visual, like just talking about the features, like people are like driving to work and not reading the release notes. But my favorite part of the release notes is that everyone that works on the features, Pierce told me, like does their part of the release notes. And we put, now this is like in the release notes from last one. Is it Josh? That has that crazy?
Yeah, Josh
term?
Spicer's theme. Yeah,
which
everyone has their own screenshots too. Yeah,
and everyone on YouTube, there's a Reddit thread that I that kicked off on the VS Code Reddit that was like, what is this theme? Because it was in the release notes and we had it in the video. This is my new default theme, is the Josh theme.
I can't stand that theme. I'm
I
sorry to
love
Josh. It bothers me to death. I'm a little insulted. No one's asked me about my theme.
Oh, I never, like, someone asked me what my theme is. I said default. I was like, I don't,
You're a big defaults guy.
I'm a big defaults guy. That is for sure. I call Josh's theme the Tatooine theme. I think that reminds me of a beautiful desert planner. So what is in this? What do people need to know about this August? We're kind of coming up at the end of August, but obviously things roll out there. What are the big boulders, Pierce, that you want to kind of call out for people to kind of follow on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think last month we started some work on kind of some source control features around supporting Git work trees. And a lot of our source control features, as you realize like how much we're going to be doing with agents and multi-agent and all that stuff, you start to realize the importance of Git in this workflow and where it is great and where it falls down. So we started work on work trees, which basically allows you to have multiple branches checked out at the same time last iteration. And so there's some more kind of work ongoing from this iteration. But another big one that I've hit a lot with the coding agent is just you have a lot more merge conflicts, right? If you're just kicking off work all over the place, it's great. But like then suddenly something changes in the branch that you based it off of, and now you have a merge conflict. And so we're kind of exploring this idea of how can we have Copilot help you to resolve those merge conflicts? Because like we want multi-agent to make you more productive, right? We don't want it to be, oh, you're having to deal with merge conflicts all the time. And so this is a cool scenario where we're saying, okay, how can AI help us? So that's super neat. Bring your own key. I'm a big bring your own key guy. And so we have a lot of improvements coming there. So we just added support actually in Insiders for OpenAI compatible endpoints. So pretty much all the major LLM providers, inference providers at this point, follow that syntax to varying degrees. And so if you have ever wanted to use like a model inside of Copilot, but we don't support it, and it's not in Azure, Anthropic, or OpenAI, or Gemini, then this is a cool way that you can actually explore using that inside of GitHub Copilot. Now, the problem is you're not going to get any, prompt specific tweaks or anything like that. But if you just want to go give it a try, it works pretty well. But in the case that you want something a bit more integrated, we also actually just released a new proposed API that we're hoping to finalize this iteration. That's basically allows extensions to contribute models to GitHub Copilot.
Wow,
so like if I have, like the fireworks.ai extension, that could actually contribute models that would show up in the model picker, which is really cool. So this is like another example of like how we build VS Code and the extensibility and how we want extensions to be able to hook into all the stuff we're doing with GitHub Copilot. So that's super exciting because now like every single inference provider on Earth, not just the ones that our team has time to go write a provider for, can actually show up in that experience. Couple other things just to hit quickly, like MCP. We've been really exploring this idea of registries. Like how can we, inside the kind of extensions view, similar to what we do for the Visual Studio Marketplace, show MCP servers, and there's a lot of kind of improvements there. Coding agent continuing to like kind of iterate on the chat sessions view that we added last iteration, where you can basically see what's happening with your remote GitHub Copilot coding agent session locally. Also trying to do better with like packaging and defaults, because it does require you to go install the GitHub pull request extension and turn on some features. And that's definitely not the happy path. That was just kind of where we started to get some early feedback. And so I think you're going to start seeing that more kind of in the default experience. And then I think last month, if I remember correctly, Burke had this awesome thread on like, what do you want to see us fix inside of chat? And there's a ton of UX paper cuts and things like that. And so we basically have a whole bunch of those that we want to tackle this iteration. We tackled some last iteration, like checkpoints, for example. But there's some we want to tackle this iteration, some of which are already inside of Insiders. Like basically the changed files thing you get inside of chat is now collapsed by default. So it takes up a little less space. We want to show how close you are to like filling the context window. Because that's important for some people because they want to avoid summarization, because it can reduce the quality of the outputs you get from the model, because you can only fit so much context into the context window. Show like thinking tokens. So like for some of the models we support inside of GitHub Copilot, we actually have reasoning turned on, but you can't actually see that reasoning trace. And so we're going to add like kind of thinking tokens to the UX. So you can actually see, okay, here's how the model is reasoning about your problem before it actually starts streaming in the actual response tokens. So we have a lot of kind of cool enhancements based off things we did last month that should be coming throughout this iteration, and some of which have already landed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited because I know at Build, we talked a lot about the MCP registries and MCP dev days as well. I have Anthropic there and the work that's being done in the open. And then, yeah, I'm pretty sure Hanselman was like the best feature ever was collapsible keep undo. So I don't know, just blew his mind. But Hanselman is a terminal guy. I am not a terminal guy. Unlike everybody else, my terminals.
You're a big buttons guy, as has been established in many of our live streams.
I love buttons. I love buttons. You press them. I love a UI. I'm a big UI person.
Big crud guy over here.
You know what my terminal is? Whatever the default is. Now I do install PowerShell, but that's about it. There's no customizations, no colors. What's in the box? It's in the box. I don't even know how to figure it out on my Mac. It's just whatever position. That's what it is. I don't know. And then you know what I do? I just ask Copilot, run the commands, build it, fix it, do it, run it. I don't know. I'm working on the vscode website right now. We have dev days. We're working on some new community stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, just do it and then run it and all this stuff. However, there's been, I've noticed because I've been using the terminal a lot because of all the amazing integrations with the chat and the agent mode. There's been tons of improvement. And that's why we brought Daniel on to not only just talk about the process, but to go deep on like what is happening in the terminal. Because if you actually go to the August iteration plan that I just talked about, there's a pretty beefy block, Daniel, of terminal stuff that's being worked on. But also there's been a lot of stuff that's already shipping as well. It's like, what is happening in the terminal in VS Code?
So I thought I'd cover initially what just landed in stable with the rewrite of the terminal tool. So historically, before Copilot Chat was open source, the tool was implemented in that extension. And that means that we're bound to what the extension API can do. Basically, dealing with that has a lot of overhead, especially when it comes to anything to do with UI. So much overhead that we didn't even pursue some things, such as like trying to show the terminal inline inside the chat view instead of opening a terminal, which is much easier to do with the extension API. But yeah, it comes with other things like it now has much richer access to like APIs internally, clearly. So instead of the very high level and easy to use API in the extension host, we have much lower level things that essentially allows us to track down all of these cases with the terminal tool hanging and fix them.
So when you say tool, you mean like kind of like the tool drop down, like inside the coding age, like these are things. There was like a terminal tool, and like you're saying the extension, like the Copilot extension, kind of went down this route instead of just having direct access, like some would assume because it is integrated.
Yeah, so there's been terminal extension APIs for many years now, and the tool that allowed Copilot to run anything in the terminal was all built on these APIs. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So does that mean that like those APIs then approve for other extension creators at the same time during this rewrite?
So as I was trying to stabilize the terminal tool on the extension host, I fixed a bunch of bugs actually in the extension host, and I improved some of the API there. But ultimately, we needed lower level stuff in order to give the sort of experience that we want. So yeah, and not on that experience that we want. So it definitely wasn't where we wanted it to be before. There were a whole bunch of cases where the terminal could hang when a command ran. And the reason for that is it's quite complicated. One of the major contributors is this is all built on shell integration, which we have a script that we inject into the shell when it launches. And that inserts little markers, basically, that allows us to see, okay, this is where the prompt started, this is where the command started, this is where the output started. Here's the exit code, here's what the command line was exactly. But when you launch your default terminal, we might either get what we call rich shell integration, which is exactly what we want. We might get no shell integration. And then we might get what we call basic shell integration, which is that huge spectrum in between nothing and rich. And yeah, there's just so many different configurations, so many different ways to do things that it's hard to capture everything.
Is there a like, I mean, I don't want to pick favorites, but like, is there like a, hey, like this shell provides one of those better experiences out of the box?
If you if you open your terminal and hover it, we'll actually show what type of shell integration there is now.
Oh,
If it says shell integration rich, you're probably going to have a good experience. If it doesn't, we hope you have a good experience. So if you don't have any shell integration, for example, it'll say that you don't have shell integration. And what that means is the terminal is just a black box of text. And we have to rely on things like waiting for the terminal to idle briefly in order to, before we send a command, to make sure that the terminal's not doing anything. That falls over in many different cases. Another thing is when the command finishes, we don't know. So one of the mechanisms we use is to wait on idle. It's not the only one. But yeah, that can fall over. Say your command echoes something every 2 seconds, it'll prematurely exit. So, in insiders, we'll show a warning saying you have no shell integration. You should look into it to improve command detection.
That's really fast. I feel like that needs a whole blog deep dive, just like what that means for folks. Because what's interesting is, as a non-terminal user myself, if I can stay away from the command line, that's my goal in life. Like, that's just my goal, right? But what's interesting is the more I use like agents, is that the power not only of MCPs are like it calling CLIs for it to call different commands that are out there. Like I was just building an app this weekend and I needed icons. So what did it do? It generated SVGs and then it like converted them to PNGs. And I don't know what it did. It was just running stuff. And I was like, this is great. So like those commands and those rebacks are like really important at the end of the day for it to execute sort of different logic.
So you're actually kind of the perfect user in my eyes because you don't touch the defaults, and the default the most of our users. Where things start to go wrong is when you use an obscure shell, or if you use something like a Z shell with a bunch of plugins, they can mess with shell integration. But yeah, if you just use the defaults, or if you just install the later PowerShell, that's even better. Then yeah, it should just work.
I like that. Yeah, I'm a big PowerShell person. I don't know. I come from the .NET background, so I feel like it's the first thing I do on every new machine is like PowerShell done. I just feel like I know it'll figure it out in general.
Yeah, and so this rewrite, Daniel, this is all unstable, right? And what kind of improvements are we seeing like on our side in terms of the experience for folks?
So we weren't doing the best job tracking this behind the scenes before. But what we were seeing was when an exception was thrown, 2.4% of all terminal calls, an exception was thrown. And what that meant was either an unexpected exception or the tool was cancelled. After the new tool shipped, we do differentiate those now. And the unexpected exception case is like 0.007% or something ridiculously small. And then the cancel rate is 1%. So
that's great.
It's very clearly improved. Some
Nice.
cancels are expected. It's hard to gauge whether we caught everything in that, but it's certainly a significant improvement from what we see.
To get that baseline basically on there. And the one thing I've noticed as well is that there seems to be this goal of not having the user click continue as much or approve or run as much. Like I actually kind of see this in some of the newer builds where things just that are safe just kind of happen. There's this thought of just let me just call, tell the agent what to do and just have it do it. But in that case, you kind of want to be safe about it. So like every MCP call, right, ask for your permission. Almost every single terminal call, previously at least, always ask for your permission, even like get status. Like, all right, you just get the status. Like it's not going to do anything, right? But that's also been vastly improved. And I continue to see iterations there. I know that that's been in this current iteration as well as further improvements. I did notice that there was a beautiful UI. Now there's not a beautiful UI, but I understand there's some beautiful UI. So like in this approving world, like what is going on there? Because if the terminal is not working better, that means that we should just be using the terminal more and it should just do more stuff, right?
Yeah. So the fewer confirmations there are, the more autonomous agent mode is, the more useful it is, the less annoying it is. So in the past, in this most recent release and the previous one, we've been iterating on the terminal auto approve system. It's kind of hidden. You have to find the setting. You have to configure your own rules right now. But it's become pretty capable and reliable. In the most recent one in particular. So yeah, coming into Insiders, a whole bunch of stuff has been happening. So rules can now target paths a little nicer. So if you have, say, scripts /test that you want to always allow, if you add that rule, it'll handle like / prefixes. It'll handle the different separators for Windows and non-Windows. There's also a UI entry point. So when you run a command, there'll be the continue button, the regular continue button, but also a drop down that allows you to either go to the setting or add some new rules based on what we suggest based on what was run. Another thing that's nice is that so there is a new UI for the confirm, and this applies to all tools. But once you confirm or once you add a rule, we'll actually tell you exactly what the rule was that auto approved this thing.
Oh, cool.
And you can click into it to go to the setting. So it's like really transparent. It's really clear how to change the rules. If you want to back out, you can click it and just undo it. Yeah, and then the other big thing is we're adding a bunch of defaults. I like to call them safe defaults. So yeah, there's a lot of things that terminal commands can do. So as an example of something we do, there's the find command that lets you find text inside files. You might think that that's safe to run generally. It's not actually, because there's a whole bunch of arguments, such as the -exec argument, that lets you just execute a subcommand inside. So for find, we will allow that command, but we'll block it when there are certain arguments used.
Oh, wow.
And this applies to a whole bunch of, I think like sort has an issue like that, and JQ, we considered adding that, but I ended up removing it because it's like trivial to execute anything from the JQ command.
Oh, wow. You and I were talking about it quite a bit. And the list, I was like, oh, dude, here's my defaults. I keep adding like, .NET Build, .NET Test, like NPM things, all this stuff. And then actually like talking through with you, I was like, oh, things are actually like a lot more complex than I think about. Because I never think about the additional arguments and the complexity of it. Because like I'm memorizing like every argument that can be passed into every single command on there. Like, was this a collaboration with like a bunch of people on the team, like with the community? Obviously, I think it's just, we'll link to the GitHub issue and on it as well. But like, how did you actually make that decision?
Yeah, I've asked a whole lot of people for feedback on this. So internally inside the team, internally inside Microsoft, we have dog fooding channels where a whole bunch of people get together. I think I asked on Twitter. I've certainly tweeted at people saying, "Can you review this?" Security people inside GitHub have reviewed it. And then I also just last week like sat down with Opus and did like several security reviews iterating on it, and it found a whole bunch of cases.
Oh, wow.
So it's in a pretty good state now. And it's interesting because you might think that having these defaults could be more risky, but when you consider things like we've done the research about these arguments, it's actually much more safe if you allow us to approve find, but not these special arguments, rather than the user seeing this and saying, "Oh, find is safe," check.
I think the other thing about that is like when there is no good defaults, then the user is way more, because it is frustrating, right? Like when you're working with the agent and there's like definitely some friction there of like, as a user, I just want things to happen, right? And so sometimes there's like a user preference to just be like, I just want everything to happen, right? And so if you have no defaults, you actually end up pushing the user to a more extreme position than just taking a reasonable one to begin with.
Yeah, something else we might add along this is deferring some of this to an LLM. So for some things like script files, it's really hard for for us to say, oh, that's safe, because the script file could do anything. But if we ask, hey, LLM, is this fine to run? Then it could add it to the approve list. The terminal auto approve mechanism also has a deny list. So if that was allowed by a LLM, but it was denied by, say, it used the RM command, it still wouldn't run despite the LLM saying it was safe. So it's just an extra thing. That's not in Insiders yet, but maybe it will be in the future.
I like that, because I think, like, kind of just like Pierce said, and you kind of been mentioning, is like right now, if every single terminal command I have to, yes, your default turns into yes. But now with this, and since I've been using it, I'm like, okay, I know that VS Code's only going to really prompt me when it really needs to prompt me more, right? And then I can start to say, okay, yeah, I want .NET Builder, I want .NET Test, but I don't want .NET Run really, because I don't want you running things in general, right? So kind of having this step through. This is awesome. I will put links to everything. Daniel, thanks so much for coming on and talking through. We'll have you back as the terminal continues to evolve. And of course, check out the iteration plans. I'm sure September will be here in no time. And Pierce and I will be back with more VS Code Insiders podcast. So don't forget that you can subscribe, of course, on our YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces there. But you can also now subscribe in your favorite podcast app. We're on everything. I woke up really early after launching the first video and got everything up on the Apple Podcasts, on the Spotify's, on the Pocket Casts, on all the things. You can go to vscodepodcast.com to find links to everything. That's going to do for this VS Code Insiders podcast. Daniel, thank you. Pierce, thank you. We'll catch you in the next one.